Step away from the checkpoint. I didn't flinch. The two guards advanced without hesitation. One tore the badge from my neck, civilian contractor, electrical systems. The other shoved me backward until my boots caught on the gravel and I stumbled, arms reflexively tied at my sides. You think you belong here? Lieutenant Martin snarled, his voice pitched just loud enough to turn heads in the motor pool. Sunlight hammered down on the cracked tarmac of Fort Laramie. A few techs paused mid-task. One dropped a wrench. I stood still, shoulders square, eyes on a distant radio tower. What's your problem, Harper? Martin pushed again, fingers brushing the edge of my sleeve. That's when he saw it. The ink. It peeked out just above my wrist, blackened lines faded by time, softened by skin stretched with age and labor. A forgotten symbol. A unit no longer listed. His face hardened. Martin's voice changed to sharper, now more urgent. Get Commander Bennett. Now. One of the guards hesitated. Sir. I said now. The other moved. The silence around us grew brittle. But I didn't speak. Didn't move. Didn't lower my eyes. They wanted fear, or at least confusion. But I gave them stillness. The same stillness I'd learned in places no map recorded. The kind that kept you alive when everything else was chaos. I heard footsteps recede. Heard voices. Knew what they saw, a middle-aged woman in flannel and jeans. Civilian boots. Tool belt still at my hip. No threat. Just a complication. I turned slowly toward the parking lot. Each shimmered off the hoods of parked Humvees. Somewhere in the barracks, a radio played a country ballad. I focused on the rhythm of it, steadying my breath. I didn't look back. Not when Martin spit the word again like it was dirt on his tongue, contractor. Not when someone muttered, just doing her job. And not when the others stood watching, unsure whether they were witnessing punishment or protocol. I walked 3 paces. Stopped. Waited. Not for permission. Just for the air to settle again. It didn't. My place was 12 minutes from the base, 15 if traffic crawled past the construction site near the river. A duplex pressed into a cul-de-sac of dust and tired vinyl siding. Nothing special. But that's how I wanted it. The curtains stayed closed. The locks stayed checked. No one visited and I liked it that way. Inside, the air smelled like solder and old paper. My workshop took up most of the main floor, tools arranged by habit, not design. Blueprints thumbtacked to the wall. A workbench scattered with stripped wires and busted circuit boards, some of them mine, most of them salvaged. I had routines. They were the only thing I trusted. Mornings started at 0500. No alarm. Just instinct. I boiled coffee in a dented kettle. 2 eggs, dry toast, a banana if I remembered. Then I'd lace my boots, check my kit, and go. The whole process took 38 minutes, start to finish. Efficiency and silence. That night, after Lieutenant Martin's outburst, I came home and didn't turn on the light. Just stood in the doorway listening. Nothing moved. Good. I stepped inside and bolted the door. In the back of the bedroom closet was a locked drawer. I hadn't opened it in 7 years. I didn't plan to. But I touched it sometimes, just rested my hand on the handle like checking a pulse. Inside that drawer was a uniform folded to regulation. Not pristine, no one keeps them that way after real combat, but intact. The patches had worn, the stitching frayed. There were ribbons too. Not many, but enough. And beside them, in a manila envelope, lay the one thing I'd never meant to keep. A letter. Unsent. Addressed in my own hand to my brother Eli Harper, last known address outside Seattle. He never replied to my last message and I didn't blame him. The letter was short. If you are reading this, it means I am no longer here. I'm sorry I chose to serve in the shadows. I am not a hero. Just an engineer. I wrote it the night before my last stop, northern Pakistan, late 2012. The mission wasn't supposed to go the way it did, but I guess they never do. We were a forward detachment, 6 combat engineers assigned to scout and defuse ahead of a larger push. Someone fed us bad intel. We dropped into a ravine that had been mapped months earlier, unaware that local terrain had shifted after monsoon floods. The entrance to the tunnel collapsed behind us on day 2. The secondary exit had been rigged with a dead man's switch. We cleared it barely, but the blast took down half the ceiling before we could exfil. 3 of us made it out. The rest? I carved their names into the back of my field notebook before we detonated the last charge and blew daylight into that mountain. But in the report filed 2 weeks later, my name didn't appear. Kia. Presumed. The record was sealed. Operation flagged as classified. No next of kin notified. Just a quiet erasure. Afterward, I was moved to recovery and reassigned under a different contract. Civilian now. Different badge. Different unit. But the same job, systems, wiring, demolition prevention. Only this time with the added benefit of invisibility. The military liked people like me, those who disappeared well. Martin didn't know any of that, of course. Not yet. But he'd seen something that rattled him. And that made him dangerous. Lieutenant Martin wasn't done. By the next morning, he'd submitted a report citing me for unauthorized access to a restricted maintenance corridor. He attached grainy CCTV stills and labeled the incident a security anomaly. 2 days later, he added an equipment misplacement accusation, said I'd left voltage testers unsecured on a power grid inspection site. I hadn't. But proving that meant challenging his narrative. And people like Martin controlled the narrative. He wasn't working alone. Lieutenant Knox's operations logistics added weight to Martin's complaints. Quiet at first, just a signature here, a note there. But I knew the type. Career second stringers. Men who performed patriotism with loud words and flawless grooming. Men who told stories of places they'd never really been. Knox claimed to have served during Operation Resolute Dagger. Claimed to have run supply lines through enemy terrain. But there were holes in his stories. Too much flourish. Not enough mud. He called me ma'am, but his eyes said something else. He saw it. The way I moved through the motor pool. The way I examined comms panels with fingers that remembered how to disarm explosives blindfolded. He watched how I avoided recognition but never confusion, how I carried myself like someone who knew what mattered and ignored what didn't. It unnerved him. Knox had built his identity on shadows he hadn't earned. And I was a shadow that refused to stay buried. One afternoon, I found a note in my locker. Folded once. No signature. You're not as invisible as you think. I didn't show it to anyone. Just folded it tighter and dropped it into the burn can beside the loading bay. The smear campaign grew louder. I was reassigned from system inspections to auxiliary tool maintenance, a quiet demotion disguised as workflow optimization. Some younger contractors stopped talking to me. Others avoided eye contact. Still, I showed up. Every morning. Same time. Same boots. Same rhythm. Because when men like Martin and Knox apply pressure, they expect one of two things, retreat or retaliation. I gave them neither. That's when Captain Raymond started asking questions. He oversaw base intelligence operations, lean, quiet, always watching. Most of us barely saw him unless something was already on fire. But I noticed him one day during a safety briefing, watching Martin a beat too long. He wasn't watching the accusations, he was watching the accuser. The next week, he initiated an internal review. Standard background validation. Nothing unusual on paper. But when my biometric file reached his screen, the system flagged it in red. Identity blocked. Status, deceased. Raymond froze. He'd seen sensitive profiles. Special ops. Deep cover agents. But never a civilian contractor flagged as deceased. He tried again, manual override. Entered his credentials, bypassed the alert, and pulled a partial file. Claire Harper. Staff Sergeant. 37th Combat Engineers. Last active 2012. He searched the archives. Found fragments in unacknowledged operation in northern Pakistan. A collapsed mountain. A presumed dead engineering unit. No survivors listed by name. No public commendations. No press. But a field report buried in a black-coded file referenced a Harper, lead engineer, EOD qualified, defused 19 active devices before detonation sequence initiated. Raymond leaned back in his chair, rubbed his temple. Then he closed the file and walked out. The next day, he showed up during a hangar inspection. Martin was already in full voice, circling me like a trial lawyer. He pointed at a mislabeled circuit diagram, claimed it was deliberate sabotage. I stood there, arms at my sides, saying nothing. The crowd watched. Some curious. Some entertained. Captain Raymond stepped in and said 4 words that scattered the whole performance like shrapnel. "Ma'am, please roll up your sleeves." The room went quiet. I didn't hesitate. I unbuttoned the cuff on my left arm and pushed the fabric to my elbow. The ink there was faded but sharp enough, the insignia of the 37th Combat Engineers. A unit that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. Raymond nodded once. "Other arm, please." I complied. This tattoo was Messier. Less ceremonial. It held coordinates, operation codes, 4 names, and one date, 09/17/2012. Underneath, 2 words in tight script, remember all. At the bottom was a list of unrecognized medals. Bronze Star, no record. Purple Heart, no ceremony. The silence deepened. Captain Raymond opened a file in his hand. Read aloud in a calm, clear voice. Staff Sergeant Claire Harper. Defused 19 live devices during coordinated ambush. Presumed killed in tunnel collapse. Memorial held. Record sealed. He looked at Martin. Your security reports have been noted. Effective immediately. All pending disciplinary actions against Ms. Harper are rescinded. And I'll be reviewing your access to personnel records. Martin didn't speak. Didn't blink. Just lowered his eyes. I didn't move. Didn't smile. Didn't say I told you so. I just turned toward the hangar wall where an exposed conduit ran crooked and unfinished. And I got back to work. I didn't return to the motor pool for a week. Captain Raymond filed a quiet report, an internal memorandum that didn't name names but confirmed misuse of authority and recommended personnel review. Martin took emergency leave 2 days later. Knox followed a week after, reassigned to a northern post pending reevaluation. No ceremony. No apology. But I didn't need one. I went back to work. No fanfare, just a tool belt, boots, and a circuit diagram that needed correcting. Most folks didn't say anything. Some nodded when I passed. 1 or 2 looked away. But I didn't come back for them. I came back for the wall. It started with a sketch. An old layout, printed years ago, plans for a memorial panel that never got built. Budget cuts. Shifting priorities. Too many names, not enough records. The design was left in a file cabinet no one touched. I found it while rewiring a security junction near Base Admin 12 blank slabs. 12 service branches. But only 9 names had ever been inscribed. The rest were meant for unconfirmed casualties, operations unlisted. That was a phrase I knew too well. So I requested a transfer. Voluntary reassignment to Memorial Infrastructure Maintenance. No one questioned it. Not after what Raymond confirmed. The project had stalled for years. No funds, no formal guidance. Just an empty site near the south fence. Concrete poured but untouched. Ivy already starting to creep along the seams. I arrived just after sunrise the next day. Alone. I brought my own tools. No clipboard. No orders. Just memory. 1 by 1 I reassembled the scaffold. Power sanded the back panels. Wipe each stone surface until it reflected light again. Then I began to engrave. I didn't need approval for the names. They were already etched into my mind, my team from the mountain. The ones who didn't make it out. The ones the records never named. I carved slowly, deliberately. Dust rose and settled again like ash. Brenner. Silva. McKee. Torres. They weren't just soldiers. They were the hands that built what others walked on. The minds that saw how things broke and made them whole again. I didn't add my own name. But I left a space. Unmarked. Just wide enough for someone else to fill someday if they remembered. I worked in silence. No music. No chatter. Just chisel, breath, stone. Some mornings a few contractors passed by. One nodded. Another left a coffee on the bench. Once Captain Raymond came by and just stood at the edge of the lot, hands behind his back, saying nothing. On the 12th day, I found a single wildflower placed beside one of the nameplates. Yellow. Delicate. At first I thought it was windblown. But tucked underneath was a folded note. Thank you to the one who saved my dad. He still tells the story. No name. No rank. Just a scribbled hand and a memory passed down. I stood there a long time, the note in my hand. I didn't cry. That part of me was still buried somewhere under rock and dust. But I let the wind take the paper and watched it rise. The next day the memorial was done. No ribbon. No speech. Just a wall of names that never made it home, remembered by one who did. A month passed. The wall stood quiet. No press came. No dignitaries. No brass from Washington. Just names and stone and silence. I liked it that way. The world kept moving, rotations changed, crews cycled in and out, the summer heat thickened. But I kept my routine. Work orders. Repairs. Wiring inspections. Most days, no one mentioned the past. Then one afternoon, during an inventory resupply, I was summoned. A young corporal, nervous eyes darting, said Commander Bennett requested a consultation. Power redundancy for the memorial sector, he said, avoiding eye contact. I followed him across base, boots crunching gravel. The sun hung low and hot. We reached admin and he led me through a corridor I hadn't walked in years. Commander Bennett was waiting, posture sharp. Raymond stood behind him. A few unfamiliar officers lingered at the edges, clipboards in hand, trying to look casual. Bennett didn't offer a seat. He opened a folder and slid it across the desk. "Do you recognize these?" he asked. Inside were photos. Old ones. Blurry thermal scans from a tunnel system in northern Pakistan. A diagram of a makeshift escape charge. A grainy image, me, bent over a live device, hand steady, backlit by fire. I nodded once. Bennett looked at Raymond, then back at me. Captain Raymond's inquiry triggered a cascade, he said. We started digging. He paused. "You were buried," he said. "Not physically. On paper. Every mission record. Every commendation. Every file routed into classified cold storage." He opened another folder. This one held citations never delivered. One for the Bronze Star. One for the Purple Heart. Another unsigned for meritorious action in hostile territory. "Why now?" I asked. Bennett exhaled. "Because a Congressional Oversight Committee just flagged inconsistencies in lost personnel records from your theater. Your name resurfaced. Someone had to explain why a decorated staff sergeant was marked dead but still collecting a paycheck as a civilian electrician." I didn't answer. Raymond did. "She didn't ask to be brought back," he said quietly. "But someone buried her to protect the narrative. We can't undo that. But we can stop pretending it didn't happen." Bennett closed the file. "What do you want, Miss Harper?" he asked. I looked at him. The same way I looked at faulty wiring, calm, deliberate, measuring where the power really ran. "I want to keep working," I said. "No title. No ceremony. No review board dragging it into the news cycle. I just want my team's names to stay on that wall. I want my clearance level restored so I can finish the upgrades. And I want Martin and Knox kept off my back permanently." He blinked. "And I want silence," I added. "For the ones who didn't get to ask for it." Raymond nodded slowly. "It's done." Bennett hesitated, then extended a hand. I didn't take it. Not out of disrespect. Just because some acknowledgments don't belong to handshakes. They belong to dirt and time and the names etched into stone when no one's looking. I turned and left. On the walk back, a young private passed me and straightened his posture, almost without realizing it. Didn't salute. Didn't speak. Just looked at me the way soldiers do when they sense something old and real has walked past. That was enough. That night, I returned to the wall. It was lit now, soft lights buried in the ground, shining up through engraved names like ghosts speaking through stone. I sat beside it. No tools. No chisel. Just me and the wind. It carried sand across the concrete, settled into crevices, danced between names. I didn't clean it. Not yet. Let it gather memory first. They earned that. Weeks passed. I didn't count them. There were more names now added by my own hand. Other engineers. IOD techs. Silent ones scattered across deployments no longer listed in official logs. Some I remembered from fragments, training rotations, brief overlaps in desert bases, a radio voice that had once cracked through the static before going silent. I engraved them without ceremony. Just memory. Every few days, someone left something at the wall. A challenge coin. A small stone. A cigarette, unsmoked. Once a folded American flag, weathered and creased, too small for a coffin, too worn for presentation. Just left on the bench. No one saw who placed it. But I knew what it meant. Recognition doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it's a quiet offering from someone who carries their own ghosts. Then one morning, a corporal approached me near the power grid. "Ma'am," he said, unsure. "There's someone asking for you." Civilian. I followed him past the canteen. Toward the south gate. A man stood waiting. Broad frame. Civilian clothes. But military posture never really leaves a person. He held a photo in his hand. "Are you Claire Harper?" he asked. I nodded. He handed me the photo, black and white, folded once. A shot of a young sergeant kneeling beside a burned-out APC. Two medics in the background. An air evac hovering just out of frame. "That's my dad," he said. "Silva. You pulled him out of a fire tunnel in 12. He didn't talk about it much. Just said someone carried him out, then vanished." I stared at the photo a long time. "He never knew your name," the man continued. "But last week, he saw the name Silva on the new wall." "Your wall." He started talking. Said he remembered coordinates burned into someone's arm. Said if that person ever came back, he'd want them to know he made it home. Had a family. He paused. He died last month. Cancer. But he made it to the end with peace. Thought you should know. I didn't speak. Didn't need to. The man looked around the base. Squinted toward the distant hangars. He used to say something strange, he added. That sometimes the only way to honor the dead was to keep doing the work they didn't finish. Then he left. Didn't ask for anything. Just walked out through the gate, past the checkpoint. I stood alone a long time, that photo still in my hand. That afternoon, I added another name to the wall. Not because it wasn't already there, but because it deserved to be carved twice. Once for the man who went in. Once for the one who came home. By midsummer, the wall had become something else. Not official. Not forbidden. But whispered. People started visiting early, before sunrise. Contractors. Enlisted. Even some officers. They left things behind, mostly small, unspoken offerings. Names of friends written on paper, tucked under stones. A tattered sleeve patch. A screwdriver. Once, someone left a folded napkin with a single line scribbled in ink, for the ones who didn't come back, but never left. One morning, I found a group of recruits standing in silence at the edge of the memorial. They didn't say anything. Just stood. After a while, one of them stepped forward, ran his fingers along the edge of the stone, then saluted. No one told him to. He just did it. That's when I knew it had taken root. They offered me a commendation. Then it again. Clean suit. Too many words. Unrecognized service, he called it. Captain Raymond stood beside him, silent. I don't need it, I said. Then it blinked. You earned. I don't need it, I repeated. They didn't press. They didn't need to. The wall was enough. Then came the news. Fort Laramie was being reviewed for decommission. Budgetary realignment. Central Command real estate evaluation. Nothing immediate. Just rumors. Draft memos. But I knew the signs. Bases don't die with headlines. They die with silence. I went to the wall that night and traced every name with my fingers. I didn't sleep. Instead, I went back at sunrise. Brought my own schematics. My own funding proposal, modest. Just enough to preserve the wall. Power it by solar grid. Establish perimeter access independent of base systems. I submitted it quietly. Attached no name. Just coordinates. It was approved a week later. Captain Raymond cornered me at the PX. You're not planning to leave, are you? He asked. I already did, I said. 10 years ago. He studied me. Then what do you call this? I looked at him. This is just the watch. Not every hero lives in headlines. Some of us return without welcome, without witness, without name. But we come back anyway. Not for glory, not for parades. For the work, for the memory, for the ones who couldn't. I still walk the grounds at Fort Laramie. Still sign in at the checkpoint. Still carry a toolbox instead of a salute. To most, I'm just another contractor, quiet, weathered, routine. But the ones who look closer, they know. They see it in the way I trace each panel at the memorial with my fingers. In the way I kneel sometimes, not to pray, but to recalibrate the light so every name catches the sunrise right. They see it in the dust on my boots. The calloused hands. The silence I wear like armor. Recognition never asked for. And still, every day I show up, I reclaim something. A little dignity. A little truth. Every bolt I tighten. Every circuit I restore. Every name I etch into stone. Somewhere, someone walks this base in peace because I once crawled through fire. They don't have to know my name. They just have to walk. I'll keep watch. Even if they never see me. Even if they forget. Because some lives are best honored not in medals or speeches, but in what's quietly protected. And some ghosts wear flannel, carry tools, and fix what others break. That's enough. End.